Story 32. My fiancé is in a car accident with her AP. I, 31M, and my fiancé, 28F, Anna, have been dating for 3 years. We met at work and ended up being lunch friends. Anna is cute, but most people consider her beautiful. Her big pluses are that she is funny and clever, making her an engaging partner. Our personalities were complementary, and we quickly became more than friends. After a couple of years, though, the shiny exterior of our relationship started to dull. Anna moved into the house shortly after I proposed. We were together 24 hours a day between our work and home lives. After talking about it, Anna decided to change jobs so we would have a little time apart. We would have our normal home life but wouldn't be forced to work together every day. This was helpful because it gave us a little time to miss each other. About 4 months after changing jobs, my relationship with Anna slowed to the point of being almost non-existent. She would be exhausted when she came home. I would be the cook as I routinely got home an hour to an hour and a half before her. I didn't think much of it since she worked in a different area and often commented on traffic or overtime as excuses. Since we weren't married yet, we kept financials separate. This continued for quite a while. One day, I was working on my taxes, and Anna mentioned she needed help with hers. I pulled up a popular online tax site and started walking her through the process. As we started entering her gross pay for the year, I was alarmed to see that the math wasn't even close to adding up. From what I could see, her base pay versus annual salary was way off. Not only was she not getting paid for OT, but it also looked like she wasn't even working close to full time. I sat there looking at her docs and asked if she had another W-2, and she said no. I asked her why her gross income was so low with all the long hours, and she froze. She started getting frustrated, told me that her work hours weren't my business, and grabbed the W-2. I looked at her and asked what she was doing with all the time she was away during the day. She then told me that her new job had dropped her to part-time and that she was embarrassed, so she just kept leaving at the same time every morning. This sounded off, but who was I to argue with her about being embarrassed? She continued to freak out, so I excused myself, telling her she needed to do them herself. It only took a week or so before she came up with another excuse to be out late. This time she claimed she would go out with some friends from work to hang out. Since she didn't bother inviting me, I assumed she didn't want me to come along. I could feel our relationship continue to fade. This went on for a few more weeks, with Anna becoming bolder with hanging out with friends as her go-to. I had already started thinking about breaking up with her, but I still had feelings and couldn't let go of our past. One day, I decided to drop an AirTag from my suitcase in her trunk to see where she was going. She ended up at a restaurant near her work, which made sense. She was there for about 3 hours, so I texted her, asking when she would be home. She said that she would be a while longer. I decided I would go full-on PI mode and drove to the restaurant. Her car was parked and waited. I watched the restaurant door and almost missed another car pulling up next to hers, and Anna got out. This surprised me since there was only one other person in the car, and it was a guy. He was dropping her off at her car. Anna got into her car and left. I got a text from her saying she was on her way home. I decided to follow the guy who dropped her off. He was driving a newer model Mercedes S-Class and returning to a nice neighborhood. I followed him to his house. There was another nice car parked in the driveway, and I could see people moving around inside. It was obvious that the guy was married with a family. A few minutes later, I got a text from Anna asking me where I was. I told her I was at the restaurant she had come from, having dinner, but I'd be home soon. I got a flurry of texts from her that I ignored, then drove home. When I walked into the house, Anna was panicking, asking what I was doing. I told her I went down to surprise her but couldn't find her or her friends. She said that they had left early, and she just stayed late to talk to one of her other girlfriends in the bar. All lies based on what I witnessed. Anna was exceptionally touchy with me that night, wanting to cuddle and hug me. I'm guessing that my attitude after getting home was showing through, and she was worried. It was obvious Anna was cheating. I was already emotionally checked out, so I started working on how I was going to end the relationship as gracefully as possible. About a month or so after I first found out that she was seeing this guy, I got a phone call from Anna's brother saying the police had just called him to say that Anna had been in an accident and that she was in serious condition in the hospital. He asked me if I'd heard anything, and I told him I had no idea that it had happened. Her brother told me the police had informed him there was someone else in the car also in intensive care. He was calling to ensure I was okay, but I could tell something was off by how he said it. I told him I was fine, and it must have been a coworker. He said he was almost at the hospital and asked if I was coming down. I told him I would be there as soon as possible. I met her brother Sam in the waiting room. Anna was still in surgery and seemed to be in pretty bad shape. Sam and I waited most of the night without much information, other than that she was still in surgery. Eventually, a doctor came out to update Sam. We both walked up to the doctor, and he gave me a long look. He asked if I was Anna's boyfriend, and I told him I was. He then talked through Anna's condition and told us that they had to remove both legs, and she would most likely lose the lower part of one arm. She also had extensive head and facial injuries. He told Sam that he was sorry, but the damage to her legs was too extensive and required immediate amputation to save her life. Sam was upset and asked when he could see her. The doctor said it would probably be a day or two before she would be ready for limited visitation. Sam asked about the driver, and the doctor gave him a very vague answer, saying he couldn't divulge information to non-family. Sam shocked me when he told the doctor that the guy was his good friend and his wife was on the way. The doctor looked at Sam, then me, and said he was probably in the same boat as Anna but couldn't elaborate. I stood there looking at Sam, and when he noticed, he looked embarrassed. He said that he was sorry. I told him I knew Anna was cheating on me because I was gathering enough proof so she couldn't continue lying to me. Then I told him I didn't realize the whole family was in on the plan. I told him, "Thanks for nothing," then left. On the way home, Sam tried to call me once and sent a couple of texts saying the guy was his best friend from high school. He believed that was enough of an excuse. I texted him back and simply told him to F off. Since Sam knew about Anna's affair, her parents were probably aware of it too. I spent the week gathering Anna's stuff and getting it packed up and ready for storage. At the end of the week, I texted her parents and told them I would drop off a key to a storage unit near their home that now contained all of Anna's belongings. Anna's father sent a simple "okay" back, and that was that. Her parents knew what was going on. I debated driving to see the AP's wife, but leaned toward not getting involved. I settled on sending all the evidence I had gathered to their home via FedEx. I put in my contact info in case there were questions, along with a letter that simply apologized for the timing, but I felt that she had the right to know what was going on. I also included that my fiancé's family was involved, including Sam. I tracked the package, and AP's wife called my cell phone a couple of hours after it was delivered. I could tell she was upset and generally angry and hurt. I made sure to listen to her as she vented and worked through what was going on. I answered her questions as clearly as possible with the timings and what I'd seen but didn't get pictures of. She was furious about Sam. She said that they were good friends and that Sam was at their house regularly. We were on the phone for more than 3 hours. She was interested in Anna and my relationship and wanted to know what I would do. I told her that I had already packed up Anna's things and put them into a storage unit for her parents to deal with. She asked how that conversation went, and I laughed and said it was one word. "Okay," from her dad. I explained, stating that I believed the whole family knew what was happening. At the very least, Sam must have told their parents after I wasn't at the hospital. I was done with them too. Susan gave me an update on AP and told me that he was in critical condition and that he was currently on life support. The doctors said that he wasn't likely to survive, and if he did, he wouldn't have a normal life. We kept in touch over the next few weeks, and Susan decided to wait until her husband's situation was clarified before making any decisions. One day, the hospital contacted her and asked that she come down to discuss her husband. She asked me if I would go with her, saying she knew this was an uncomfortable request, but didn't have anyone else. I asked about AP's family, and she said she told them what was happening, and that she knew he was having an affair. They hadn't spoken since she informed them she was planning to file for divorce once AP was released from the hospital. Her parents were angry that she wouldn't forgive him and was going to abandon him with special needs. She said she got angry and said that they could care for him since they were so willing to forgive his faults. I agreed and met Susan at the hospital, and we visited the doctor. While walking through the waiting area, I walked past Sam and his parents. Sam walked over to talk to Susan, and she screamed at him, forcing Sam to step back. Sam's confused eyes met mine as I continued to walk with her. The meeting was about as bad as it could be for AP. The doctor said he was on end-of-life protocol and didn't expect him to survive more than 2 or 3 days at most. They asked Susan about AP and her wishes regarding organ donorship. Susan told them that she was okay with that. They had a bunch of paperwork for her to sign, and we left. As we were leaving, Sam called out my name. Susan looked at him and told me that she'd wait outside. I walked over to Sam and his parents. Sam took a deep breath and asked me how AP was doing. I informed him it wasn't my place to divulge his health status and that he'd need to ask Susan. He nodded and asked me if I wanted an update on Anna. I told him I wished her the best, but Anna and I were done. Sam said she was asking for me and that I needed to talk to her. I told him I didn't owe her or your family anything since the day she cheated on me with AP. Anna's parents at least had the common decency to look embarrassed when I said that. I found Susan standing out front of the hospital, speaking with a sobbing woman and her husband. These were AP's parents coming at the request of the doctors, and Susan had just told them what the doctors told her. Susan hugged his mother and father, then walked to her car. I walked to mine and got a text from Susan. She asked if we could meet at the popular coffee shop next to the hospital, so I did. Susan was emotionally a mess, and we sat outside for a couple of hours and just talked. She went through various emotions, from crying to sadness to anger and back again. I just sat there listening to her, trying to say things I thought might help. I had known of the affair for longer than Susan and hadn't had to make any life or death decisions as she did. I just wanted to help as much as I could. We parted ways, and I headed home to try and de-stress from everything that happened that day. Susan called me the next afternoon to tell me her husband had passed. I didn't know what to say other than I was sorry she had to endure this. I told her I'd do anything to help if she needed something. We talked on the phone for hours that day since she just needed someone to be there for her. It was tough for me to show anything like remorse for AP's death since this guy destroyed my life. It wasn't Susan's fault, so I did my best to simply be a friend. I did see Anna about a year after she was released from the hospital. I won't go into it too much, but a year of her and her family's requests had finally worn me down enough to meet them. I went to Sam's and Anna's parents' house to meet her. When I arrived, Sam met me at the front door and led me around the back of the house to their backyard, where Anna sat in her wheelchair. She was sitting in the chair with a blanket over her legs, prosthetic, but wasn't wearing a prosthetic arm that day. Her facial features were still beautiful, but marred by some pretty devastating scar tissue that would probably be permanent. I sat with her on her patio for an hour while we talked about how she was doing and what was coming next for her in her recovery. Anna said she could now get around without the chair, but it was still painful for an extended period. She said she was waiting for a new prosthesis for her arm. The current one was temporary until her last round of surgeries were completed and healed. Anna had changed a lot. She talked about what was happening to her and then asked me how I was doing. She somehow knew I was seeing Susan and told me she hoped I would find happiness with her. I told her that I was happy, and that caused her some pain, which was evident on her face. She didn't say anything other than nodding to me after the comment. At the end of the hour, I told her I needed to get going. Anna nodded, took the blanket off her lap and stood on her new legs. I thought she did exceptionally well for only having them briefly. She held out one arm and I stepped forward to hug her. I broke the ice a bit when I laughed and said, "You're taller now." She laughed and said, "Yeah, she noticed that too." She stopped and looked at me, holding my upper arm with her remaining hand for balance, and told me quietly that she was sorry for not being a better person and partner. I said it was good to see her and wished her the best. She kissed my cheek, saying goodbye, and I left. No, Susan and I are not dating, but I didn't feel like I needed to correct her. It's better that she thinks I've moved on.
I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.